Haha, that looks really cute.
Oh, I love it!
You're listening to the Mike Cassidy Photography Podcast. It's your real-world photography business masterclass with no BS and no magic shortcuts. Here's your host, Mike Cassidy.
And boom goes the dynamite. Greetings. My name is Michael, and I am your neighbor.
I am your neighbor.
Welcome to the showgram, everybody. What's going on? My voice. My voice. I think allergies are already getting to my voice. Well, what's going on with me? Well, I am currently running on the hamster wheel of life with this spring bridal season. I think if you're a wedding photographer, you're probably going nuts. It's a busy time. If you're a boudoir photographer, you're probably going nuts. It's a busy time. And if you're someone like me, well, you're just plain old nuts all the time. You may be asking yourself, what's the hamster wheel? Well, you know that little spinning wheel in a hamster cage, and the hamster runs on it and it just spins round and round, and the hamster's running like crazy, but he really isn't going anywhere. Well, you can have that kind of feeling this time of year when you're working on a project after project after project, and you feel like you're getting nowhere, even though you're just grinding away day after day, and it can be exhausting and frankly a bit demoralizing as well. You know, and I'm not complaining about working, but it certainly can catch up to you after a while. And you know, for me, the way I tend to work is if I have a session, I do my sessions during the daytime and handle my clients during the day, and then the afternoon or the evening, I like to work on my editing and other business when it's quiet. And last week was a good example. I was rushing to get 2 photo books done for a couple of brides, and then I got another one out over last weekend, just work. And even just last night, I sent a first proof to another bride, and it's like each time you sit down and look at your project hard drive, there's like 5 or 8 or 11 open projects like sitting there, and it seems like you never get to the end. You finish one thing and then there's another one waiting for you to start, and this really can create a feeling that you're never getting caught up and you've always got more to do, because you know, at any given time there's always something to do. Rarely come home and think, boy, I've got no work to do tonight, because you know, lurking on that hard drive are new projects just sitting there and waiting for you. And I don't want you to think that this is about bragging, but this kind of thing really can become overwhelming for people at times, you know, especially if you're working on deadlines. Like, for example, with weddings and anniversary, there are always deadlines. Projects need to be completed by certain dates. And, you know, actually, I mentioned it, this is probably a good topic for a show because it's a real thing. And I'm sure that many professionals deal with this on a daily basis. And this is where burnout really can start, and anxiety and stress. And what I've learned is you really have to know how to partition your life. You have to take care of yourself and give yourself small breaks, and even something simple like what I mentioned, like what I do is just take off and go to the park, and even just sitting there for an hour and having lunch alone, you know. And I go to jiu-jitsu, which is a great stress reliever that I've done for years. And, you know, on a more complex level, you know, it is understanding the difference between your identity, which is you as a person, and your role, which is you as a photographer. And you have to train yourself to be able to step out of that role and not let the role start to consume your life and get you all stressed out when things don't go well, or if you have people coming after, or whatever the case may be. Your identity and your role are two separate things. That also sounds like another show. Boy. And, this whole thing can be self-defeating if you let the stresses and the work all get to you. Your photography will suffer. You won't approach your projects with the same enthusiasm. And in the long term, this all can affect your business. So take a break, do a word search puzzle, go for a bike ride, even step away for a day or so and don't think about your work, if that's what it takes to sort of reconnect and gather yourself together. But, you'll get through it. I definitely recommend reading up and studying about roles and identity and understanding the differences. It could really help you during busy and stressful times. And if you have any tips for dealing with busy times or have any questions about this, let me know. Love to hear from you. And speaking of questions, today's show is all about questions. My guest is Christora Osters of Green Apple Weddings in Louisville, Kentucky. And Christora is an accomplished wedding photographer who I met her a few months ago when I did a podcast that she and her podcast partner Tom Russo host called The Capture Crew. And when we were talking, I think this was even after we were recording, we were talking for a while, and Christora was talking to me about how she was adding boudoir to her wedding photography business, and she had a few questions. I could see she had a few questions. So we thought this would be a great idea to do a boudoir Q&A episode. So what she did is she made a list of questions and sent it over to me, and this is what we got. I think this show, again, it's about an hour long, so in my typical fashion, this show gets into some detail. I made myself laugh because in this episode, it's mostly me talking. Bah, 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 bah. And I even became aware of this about 2/3 of the way through. But it's a good show, and there's some info in here that really can help any and all aspiring boudoir photographers. So I think you should just crack open a hot mocha java, get a corn muffin or something, and give this a listen. And as always, I enjoy hearing from you, and you can connect with me online at Instagram at Mike Cassidy Podcast or via my email at mike@thephotographypodcast.show if you feel like reaching out to me. And thanks so much, and I'll see everybody on the next show. Today, I'm talking to Christora. I met Christora a couple of weeks ago on her show. I was on with her and her partner, Tom, on the Capture Crew podcast. And when is that? You said that was going to come out in March at some point?
Yes.
Or don't know. We don't know. These things just kind of come out when they come out. I understand that whole thing. It's like when you kind of get to it. But we had an interesting show talking about boudoir, how that sort of works, and a lot of questions about boudoir. And Christora is an established wedding photographer, and she had a genuine interest in adding boudoir onto her business. And she was like, but Mike, wait, I may have a few questions for you. And so we talked a little bit about that on your show, but then I thought it would be a great idea because we would have a little bit more time to come in and expand on your questions and talk a little bit more in detail because, people want to jump in. And I think we talked about this a little bit before I started that I think it is a great add-on for someone in the wedding business because you can bring women into that fold where there can be an engagement, then you could do a boudoir session for them, and then you could do the wedding photos. So you can kind of get people for that cycle. And why not? It can help you add more money to your business, and it's also great for building relationships with the clients and offering that. And so Christora is here with me today, and we're going to chat. And she had a bunch of questions, so I had them all written down, so I remember to get to all these. So we're going to run through these questions, learn a little bit more about getting started in boudoir. And I didn't want to, and I told her this a few weeks ago, I didn't want to pollute the questions by me like saying what she should ask, because it maybe things that seem important to me are not necessarily important to somebody else, or vice versa. So I kind of wanted a not to taint this in any way. So she sent me a list of, I don't know, maybe 10 questions or so, and we're going to work through those. So how's that sound? Sound good?
It sounds perfect. And you're 100% right. Adding that onto a wedding package. I mean, it not just does it allow the bride to see themselves in a different way before the wedding, but also the trust that it builds between you and the bride. I mean, there's a big difference between boudoir and wedding from what I understand so far. So I'm super excited to kind of dive in and hear what your expertise is.
Yeah, it's fun. So it's interesting to do. And there's a lot of people who, I think, I get this in bits and pieces in my email once in a while, or on Instagram. People will send you a question, but it's not often that you get to talk to somebody who has like experience, who can just answer any questions you may have. So that's what we're going to do a little bit here today. And one thing that would always be interesting to me to know is, like, what exactly about adding one more job? Like, because it's a lot of work. Like, what is it that sort of piqued your curiosity about adding this? It's not like you probably have enough going on as it is, but it's fine if it was just the money, or if it was a genuine interest. But what would sort of your germ of the idea that made you think that, yeah, this is something I wanted to add to my portfolio or my business?
I had one of my brides who asked for it. And so I was very upfront and honest with her and said, I've never done boudoir before. I really don't know what I'm doing, but I'm willing to try. I'm willing to do the research. I'm willing to try. Let's do it. And the empowerment at the end of the session was something that you don't get from a wedding. You don't get it from an engagement session. There is something about helping women empower themselves that it really like cut to my core, if that makes any sense. So when someone walked away and they understood how beautiful they were to the world, that was everything to me. And so that's really why I want to add it on, is a bride has a different beauty on her wedding day than she would in a boudoir session. And so we all have different facets to us, right? Like, I might appear beautiful when I have my hair up and I'm running down the road with my face red because I'm an athlete at that moment. But there are other times where I'm beautiful because I'm dressed up and I'm wearing a deep red lip, and my husband just comments about how glamorous I look. But there's different forms of beauty and different times that we can feel beautiful. And I think that being able to capture those different moments for a bride in particular, for her wedding day, her engagement, and then adding on that aspect, that's more of a well-rounded viewpoint of what you actually look like to the world. So I really found that the empowering aspect of it was second to none. It's probably the best I felt about a shoot in a very long time, just because of how excited the women are afterwards. Does that make sense?
It's different. Yeah. And, it's different. We talked about this a little bit on your show, that, when I got started, I lacked the benefits of age and wisdom to know that I wasn't supposed to be able to do what I do. No one came out and said, you can't do this because you're a man. So I kind of forged ahead, and it wound up, where it is. So yeah, I understand that. Of course, not from the perspective of a woman. And as we were talking about, men and women are very different. So it has taken time and a lot of talking with the people that I've worked with. And yeah, you really get to see things from a different opinion, because, as a man, they don't think that way. There's no, like, when you're looking at a poster for, and I think I heard this on another podcast where I forget where, when you're looking at a poster of like Aquaman, and I forget that guy's name, that big muscular guy up there, no man ever thinks, Momoa, that's the guy's name. No guy ever thinks, well, that's not realistic. They shouldn't put a guy on there because that's not what men can be. Men's brains don't work that way, obviously, where women are always thinking that's an unrealistic goal. No one could ever do it. So it's very different the way that people's minds kind of work. So it's seeing things from a different point of view. And the one unexpected benefit that you do get is that sense of fulfillment, even that you've helped somebody to change their life a little bit. And really that makes part of the great part of what I do is afterwards the session and people just telling you, wow, this was so much fun and I had a great time and seeing their reaction and never thinking that, they could be one of those people they see on your website. And the reality is usually it's just a small gap. But they can't bridge that gap. And somehow you can connect them to that version of themselves that they don't see themselves ever being. And, for most people, it's like I said, it's a small distance, but when you could take people there, it's really nice. And, not to be sounding super mushy and make it sound like it's all about crying and weeping, but the effects of these sessions for women last for years. And I think we talked about a little bit about that on your show. But I think also before you get to that state of being able to accomplish that, the awful thing about Boudoir and is that there's so much bad photography out there.
Oh, yeah.
And my number one thing is, that's this empowerment as you talk about, or, that's a great part of it. But if technically and business-wise, you have no idea what you're doing, that's not enough. Just putting up a website and I'm changing the world isn't enough when I'm going to curse using shitty photos to, it's just not, the message isn't enough. So there needs to be something to back that up. So we're going to go through a few questions that you had and get into this and have a little discussion about some important things, or that for people that want to get started in doing what I do, some areas of focus, or, Christora, these are probably questions that a lot of people have, and
I would think so. So, I guess my first one would be location-wise. So, like I said, the first boudoir session, I did my first boudoir session in my house.
Right.
And because I didn't know about locations, but what kind of locations do photographers really need to have to create that boudoir experience? Yeah.
And this is an interesting and important part of it, because, when you are doing weddings or if you're a pet photographer, the location is kind of built in. You don't have to think about that. You're going to a wedding venue, you're going to an outdoor park or a site, and it's just there. But in boudoir, you often have to bring people to a certain location, or whether you're going to have a building like I have that is built for that purpose, which I don't recommend doing when you first start. But, at home is perfect to start out with, because it's there. And when I first started doing this years and years ago, that's what I would do. I had a spare bedroom in my house and would be able to bring people in. And because as we talk about, the only place where boudoir takes place is an actual bedroom setting. And I hate to burst people's bubbles, but there's no such thing as outdoor boudoir. There's no such thing as doing boudoir in a basement with a backdrop, and that's not what boudoir photography is. So now opinions vary, and as an art form, there isn't necessarily one right answer here, but boudoir, as the name says, is a bedroom setting. So whether this is at home, whether you have a rented building or a studio where you create a bedroom vignette, which a lot of photographers do, they will create one wall and put a bed in there and decorate around it to make it look like a bedroom. But that is the essence of that. So when you do get started, as you mentioned, you're like, wow, where am I going to bring these women, and where am I going to go ahead and do this? So if you have a spare bedroom, that's great, and that's probably how I would start, because you're not paying rent, you're not, unless you're going out to a hotel or somewhere. But the issue becomes unfamiliarity with the environment, and not everything is a great setting if you want to use window light or you want to haul a lot of junk around to a hotel. So when you brought people into your home, how do you primarily work? Are you using a lot of flashes when you do this, or is it just mostly ambient light, or how did you manage that first session, or your regular work?
Not typically. No, I'm not. I'm starting to get more into lighting, but I want the lighting for the dramatic, and dramatic is not what I go for with boudoir. I want it to be soft. I want it to be romantic. I want it to be classy. And so I tend to just use ambient. Well, I've only done 4 boudoir sessions, but all of them have been with ambient light, which I found very flattering, if that makes any sense. So that I don't really like the idea of using a flash during boudoir. You can tell me if I'm wrong. 100%.
No, and see, this is one of the things where there isn't a right answer. It just comes down to a person's preference and their style. And the downside to using like natural light or window light is it's a iffy thing. You know, you have cloudy days, or we were talking like I was supposed to have a session on Monday with blizzards, and you have to work during the daytime. You really can't do this at nighttime. But the look is 1,000% different than if you were to bring in a bunch of those flashy strobes and lay a woman on a bed, and it's much more harsh looking. The shadows are so much more intense. And that's fine if you want that dramatic. And there are people who shoot boudoir, it's all black and white and these dramatic light falling across. And that's just another style, which is okay. But if you, like my photo, everyone look at mine, they're very light, they're very, I think of them as more beautiful and cheery. You only, I think, get that kind of look with that soft light coming through a window. So if you choose that, you're limiting yourself in a sense, because you need windows that are going to work for that. You need a building or a room that's going to have that kind of lighting. And that's why it makes it difficult to work at people's homes, because sometimes you'll have someone, can we just do this at my house? And you'll show up and they're like living in a cave. You know, they'll have like 2 small windows, the walls are painted brown, or in the furniture, everything is dark, and it's just not going to look. So and it's true. And I won't go to people's homes anymore for the most part, unless I see it. But if you walk in expecting one thing and the room is painted brown, and you're not going to be able to, you're going to be like, what do I do? What do I do now? So working at home, or a place where your environment and how to shoot in there, that way you can do the look that you want to look.
I will say the interesting thing has been seeing my husband's reaction, because I'll say you need to leave. Like, clearly he is not going to be there during a boudoir session. At least that's the way that I've worked it.
I mean, your husband.
And my husband.
Okay.
Yeah. Not.
I thought you meant the husband of the.
No. But my husband being around the house, and he'll be very apprehensive coming back. Were they on our bed? Did they use the spare bedroom? It's like, sweetie, they only use the spare bedroom. We're not gonna, but it's been a process for him to really kind of loosen up about it, just because I think in his mind, he doesn't quite grasp the idea behind it. Yeah. I mean, I think he just thinks that there are women walking around our house and like naked. Yeah. So, which is, it can be true.
I think that could create some anxiety for people too, because the women are often nervous enough, and having another person there, or kids walking around or something like that. So yeah, I can see where not only that can be
like, I definitely kicked him. I kick him out every time. It's okay. And he understands.
Yeah, but that's what I would do. If you have the space and you have the room, paint it a bright color, white or a nice light color. And one thing you'll find too, you'll be introduced into the world of color casts, and you'll realize that by just working with window light, if your room is yellow, your people will start to look yellow. If it's blue, your people will start to look blue. And you'll go home and look at your pictures and you'll be like, oh. So the other downside there is that you'll have all kinds of white balance problems, and depending on your shade or light. So you have to learn how to adjust for that. And I would always say, which I still fail to do, because not all cameras are super great with white balance unless you're manually setting it, but have a known item like a gray card or something, have the woman hold it as your lighting changes. So when you're in Lightroom or whatever, you can always have a known point to adjust and to make people not look green or blue or yellow.
It's a brilliant idea. Just have that card up right away. Take a photo.
Yeah, or I forget what it's called, and I don't have it here. There's one that I have that is fold out. It has like it's not just gray. It has like all the color splotches on it. I can't think of Spider Picker or Spider Checker or something that even has like it's meant for color correction too. And there's software. So if you're in a dicey situation, they can hold up this multicolor card, and then the software automatically changes all the colors to the right colors too. So it's like automated. I forget what it is. I'll look it up and and put it in the notes. So gray card, in Lightroom, you can click on it. It's not perfect, I found. It's hit or miss sometimes, but sometimes those little color cards with the multicolor, it has like 30 or 40 different color swatches on it, and there's automated software built into Lightroom that will automatically color correct and change that. So I don't know how we talked about that. We were talking about your husband, and the next thing I'm talking about color correction. But
you have to have the right color scheme for your. That's something that I had to do, is I needed to purchase a different comforter. So because I didn't have a white or gray or beige comforter.
Yeah, too busy, I think, is no good. Right.
Yeah.
You don't want checks and polka dots that interferes. No.
Yes. So what do you think actually ends up making a session great?
Well, this is something too that doesn't have one answer. And I guess it can mean great from your perspective, great from the client perspective, so on the photographer perspective, I think there's two things, and it's making sure the person has a great time, and not keeping them nervous the entire time, accomplishing that mission of making them have fun. And then obviously the reason why they're coming in is because they're expecting a result, and being able to deliver that result. And as I said, a lot of the women don't see themselves as the people they may see on your website or something, and bridging that gap and turning them into that person that they're like, oh my God, I can't believe that's me. So ultimately those two things are part of how I measured a successful session. There's a lot of smaller steps in there, and on the customer perspective too, they have this mindset of what they, want to get out of the session as well. They're mostly thinking results, but it's an experience for them as well. And I found too that you get so good at what you're doing, you don't have to take a lot of pictures. Like I can go through and I could do a whole session with very few pictures, but I take a lot more pictures than I need to, because it's not about me. It's about the experience for them. And you'll see that point where they start to finally relax and have fun, and then they're going to. So we're taking a lot more shots than we really need to, and managing that, keeping them having a great time throughout the session. So on their part, they're looking for the fun and the results as well. So I think those are the two things that really are different, very different. Like we talked about, technically being able to do what you're doing, which. And a lot of people talk about where you need this gear. The gear doesn't matter. People don't care what you have. They don't know. It doesn't matter. They don't care. But they just want that cute photo, I think, in the end. And when they look at their galleries, or if they're coming in for their viewing and you see that reaction, like, oh my God, I can't believe that's me. Or you get those emails, then you know that you've sort of accomplished your job, and you can be like, yes.
So I was in a debate with another photographer about this the other day. Do you show them the back of the camera, or do you not during their session?
Yeah, and this is like a topic that you will find very polarizing. And there is like one group, I would never do that. Oh, you never show anybody, because, which I understand, because if you show something that and then they go like, what do you do then? Then they're kind of like thinking, well, maybe this isn't going kind of the way
best picture I've ever taken.
And they're like, all right. Or they, you get that kind of shrug. And so, some people don't do that because they want to, first of all, it can slow everything down if you're showing them every single picture, and then they have nothing to see later. But if you also show something that isn't quite what they expected, that can bring the vibe down a little bit in the room. So I get it. There are other people who do. I do a little bit, especially when we get started, just so people, again, can kind of see kind of what's going on. They're like, oh, yeah, wow, I am doing it. I think that can add a bit of ease to them because they're just standing there and you're moving around. So they really, to them, it's like nothing's happening. So if you can show them a photo or two, and then they're like, wow. But it's tricky again. So you have to make sure it's something that they're going to like smile and enjoy. And I think this is something by trial and error to see what works best for you. I don't show people a lot of pictures, but if they are like lying down and you're altering your focus, they don't get really a sense of what you're doing. So you can show them, you can see here how your wedding ring is in focus and everything fades away. Then they're like, oh yeah, I really like that one. So I do. there isn't a right or wrong answer to that. Probably don't want to show them every single picture, like I said, because then there's nothing to see later. And then just be careful, because if you get that kind of reaction, I think you could be like, ooh, you can really.
And like you said before, you don't give them every photo you take.
No.
So if you're showing every single picture that you take, then you've run the risk of, well, where's this photo and where's this photo? Yeah. And I don't want to deal with that either.
Yeah, and the thing is, I don't hear that often, and most people never remember because you're taking so many photos. If a couple aren't in there, I always tell people that what I do too is often take multiple shots of every pose, because people blink or whatever, and if you may have the perfect picture and someone's like, their face, you caught them like in the middle of a blink. So I do a lot of duplicates, and I tell them don't move till I tell you to move, because the blinking and so forth. But yeah, and then there's the calling out, because there's times where something is just like, and you're just not going to use it. So if I don't usually tell people how many photos I have at the end, so they don't really know. And then through that process, I'm automatically weeding out a whole bunch when I get home, cutting out those duplicates, cutting out the ones that just don't kind of look. So once in a while, though, if someone does have a favorite and they're, oh my God, I love that one on that couch, are there any more of them? Then I would go back in and upload a few others that were, in that same. But I try to limit what I show for the sake of, one, it just really makes things more difficult for people, because if you're showing them like 5 or 10 photos of the same thing, it's hard enough for them to pick. So it just makes it a little easier for them, because sometimes there's actually too much choice for people. So each pose or each room or I'll try to just have very few of that to make it honestly simpler for the person.
Yeah, that to me, that makes perfect sense. I know that there are people who would argue the other side, and that's perfectly fine too. Like you said, if it works for you, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about like the deliverables and giving the deliverables to your client as part of the experience. What other communication do you utilize to help create that trust with your clients?
Well, this is, I think, a place where someone like you would have an advantage versus someone like me. Like if someone contacted you in terms of, if they're reaching out to you for an engagement session, sure. And then it goes to the booth where you may have that relationship already with that person. And the whole key is getting to know somebody first.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people aren't going to just say, yeah, I'm going to go take my clothes off for this person without really knowing a little bit about them. So you have that building of a relationship with someone first, and they're like, wow, she's great. I feel more comfortable talking about this topic, or I would work with her, because you have that relationship with them. So one of the things that I found is that, just emailing somebody back and forth isn't necessarily the best way, because, you can't express, your excitement or anything with them. People just, as odd as it sounds, in 2021 or whatever year this is, pick up a phone and call somebody, because when they hear your voice, or if they hear, that could really make a world of difference in building those relationships. Or now FaceTime. Get them on the FaceTime or get them on a Zoom. And I'm a big proponent of, when people contact me, initially I send them a video response. I send them a video email back, so they can connect you and say, all right, he's an all right kind of guy. All right, I would do this. And you only have a short window, I think, to build those relationships. Right. And the one thing I think people often don't think about is, you may not be the only person that they're contacting. They could have decided, this is my time. They're going on the Google machine, searching for boudoir photographers in the whole state of Kentucky, and they may be contacting 10 people in one day. And, so you have to always think of it in terms of, you're just one of however many people that they've been contacting, and what's going to help you get the leg up. Well, I'm sending them a video email so they could see me, hear me talk, explain a little bit, answer their questions a little bit in person. And
sure.
Not a lot of other people are doing that. It's expensive for those video email services, but for me, it's kind of worth it. So they can kind of build that, get somebody on a phone. A lot of women won't answer their phones, but I always say, hey, it's a little easier for me to explain. And if they're serious, they'll talk to you. The downside is often these sessions are secrets.
That makes perfect sense.
So women can't necessarily talk at home, or they don't want to be talking about their underwear at work. So it's not always something that they can talk about. But again, if they're really into, they will find the time to get on the phone and chat with you. So I would always say, get that phone call, get them a video email whenever possible. Don't just send them an email reply, because that's what probably everybody else is doing. And we're trying not to be like everybody else, in this business. So those are some of the tools that I've sort of worked on. But aside from that, I think you need to be a certain personality really to, and as we explained, I think we were talking about in your show, it's not anything that I do differently other than I already, and so I'm not like any kind of a, hey, it's not like I'm becoming, and people pick up on that. And I've seen that before, where people go into this character or this role as their photographer. I think people are very keen to pick up on whether this is like an act or this is just something you're being salesy or whatever. So I think you just need to have that genuine personality. You'll find too, a lot of women, even up front, will be emailing you, I'm overweight, I'm very afraid, I don't know if this is for me, I don't, and there's some self-doubt there. So you just have to be very accepting of these people and non-judgmental. And, that is something people are very alert to. You can't nuance that in an email, but by talking to someone, you can explain, yes, I understand. This is a common thing that people come to me with, and here's what we do about that. So just aside from building those relationships in a technical front, I think you need to have that just mindset and that personality that is sort of comforting and genuine to people. So they're, I don't think it's a place for joking. And I'm a silly kind of a person, so, when we're there to try to make it fun and not like goofy, but in that initial meetup, I don't think people want jokey. They don't want silly. They don't want, any kind of character.
They don't have a relationship with you at that point.
And that, and the key there is that, and this reminds me of, a job I used to have in sales job, where this one guy, he was a very nice guy, but and this was a very high ticket sales business, and when people would walk in the door, he'd always be like cracking jokes, and not everybody walks into that aspect looking and know it's going to be a lot of money with someone who doesn't want to seem like super serious about what they're doing, or, not everybody is. I think being jokey is not necessarily the right thing. Again, that's just me. Because people are on an edge or anxious a little bit, and I don't think that helps. But you just need to have that calming type of approach with people, and everybody's different, and you just sort of adapt to them. And if you find they're a little bit more jokey, you can lighten up. So if some people are very serious, stay serious. But before going one way or the other, talking to somebody, stay very neutral and kind of on that level ground. And then once you get a little feel for them, you can adjust the way you speak to them or interact with them.
Well, it's about recognizing people coming to you in a vulnerable state.
Right.
Because a lot of people are very afraid to show their vulnerabilities or their insecurities. And the second that someone does and you respond and it's a shaming response, or it's a response that you think is appropriate, but it's inappropriate, that they're gone.
Yeah. And it's also has to do, we talked a little bit about roles of people, and, women have roles. They're moms, they're workers, they have kids hanging on their legs. And there isn't really a lot of avenues where women can, and Boudoir is a bit about sexuality, where they can openly talk about these things. They're always told not to, or people are going to feel, or judge you in some way. So a lot of times people are just uncomfortable talking to somebody initially about, I want to do this, this, and this, because they're not used to going up to somebody and saying those things. So a lot of things people that they really want to do or have interest in a session aren't even going to come out at first. Again, they're going to hold that back, and you may not find till even when they're in your building and they're having a great time, they'll be like, oh, by the way, I really wanted to do photos like this or like this or like this, when they see they're going to be okay and they see everything is going to be fine and they're having a good time. So you're dealing with a lot of kind of cultural issues as well, where people are just uncomfortable talking about these topics with somebody. So that's a big part that I don't think people think about even up front.
Well, I think it's great that you know how to empathize with the women and kind of hold their hand through it. So it's something that I'm working on. I'm
Yeah. And it takes
I'm pretty
practice.
I'm pretty jokey too, and I definitely don't want to. I don't want somebody to feel like they should never do a session. If they don't do it with me, it's okay. But I want them to still have that confidence to reach out to someone.
Yeah. And you're
have the
not going to be
opportunity.
the perfect person for everyone, just like,
Right.
like I'm not.
Right. Right.
And that's okay.
Yeah, I agree.
But I think that in the world of women's portrait photography, and we'll get to this a little bit down the road in a couple of these other questions, but, you know, it has kind of been taken over by what I call this like broken women syndrome, where
Yeah.
a lot of photographers, their whole message is that every woman is broken and I'm here to fix them.
No.
You know, which I think just sets this very strange tone, but we'll get into that like in a little bit down the road.
Okay. So how did you end up getting the word out initially? Like starting to get into boudoir myself, I know that I have an avenue with my current brides. I have an avenue with my future brides. However, I would love to be able to get my word out to everyone. So how did you kind of promote yourself and market yourself as a women's boudoir photographer? How did it go from there?
Yeah, and of course you have to understand that it was a different time than now. And even though that was just 12, 14 years ago, you know, social media really wasn't a thing, or just starting. You know, after I was going, Facebook was just going, and that's wasn't an avenue that you really turned to. So at first you had your website, you know, so that was really your primary way of getting your message out there. And then you had to cross your fingers and hope someone somehow found you. So that's a slow process because the way Google indexes websites, they don't push you right away to the top of your list. And, you know, there's the whole SEO thing that goes on with that. But, you know, you're just sort of casting out a line and hope somebody bites. You don't have a lot of control over that. So I was fortunate in that when I was getting started, most of my work came through referrals, and I happened to be very lucky in that I got caught up into like a few wedding trees where I would work with a woman, and then right away like 4 or 5 of her bridesmaids were getting married, and then they would have 4 or 5 bridesmaids that were getting married, and so it went like from person to person to person. And that's what you'll find a little bit sort of in boudoir, where one woman will come in and then she'll be like, is my friend Tina, can she come along? Because she may be getting married like in 6 months, and she kind of wants to see what's going on. So a big core of starting your business, I think, is those referrals, which you have built right in, because you will have those wedding groups. And then their bridesmaids are typically ones that are not too far down the road, are also getting married. And if you do a good job with the first one, she, of course, will tell all the other women in that group. And that's how you start to, I think, initially build up people. That's not the be all end all. I mean, that's a good starting point, but you always have to grow beyond that. And that's where I think getting the word out now through social media and, you know, Facebook or Instagram or whatever avenue you choose, you can really broaden your horizons, you know, by using hashtags and posting, and that helps you reach a lot of other people. But that's another whole, you know, part-time job in doing that.
Oh, sure.
So, you know, you're lucky. I think you have a leg up because you have an established customer base. You can have an email list of maybe all the people that you've worked with and just send out a blast. Oh my God, I'm doing, you know, boudoir sessions, and I know you're great, and you can help me get started by maybe sharing with any friends that you may have that are getting married. In your case, that's what I would certainly do.
Sure.
I hope you have names in an email list somewhere.
I
that you
do.
could send things out to.
Of course I do.
And, you know, remember me? It was a year ago, and I just want to touch base with you because now I'm entering this, and so many women have come to me, and I figured I'd share this with you. So the email list is a great way, if you have that established, to use that to leverage people coming in. And that's probably, in your case, the first thing that I would do to start to grow that audience. And you'll see that you'll get referrals from your brides, and then I know you're on social media. I've seen you're on Instagram and so forth. And whether it's using the same one or creating another one, it's very hard to build a following. It's very hard now because I think that's kind of peaked in a sense to get more followers. But that's another way I would go, making the little videos and doing stuff like that. But it takes time. The bottom line is it takes time. It takes a couple of years to start to build like a core of people that are going to be able to find you.
It makes a lot of sense. I actually just recently, one of the 4 boudoir sessions that I've done is a makeup artist that I've worked with over the last 3 years on a lot of different weddings. She actually was doing the makeup for the 2 other boudoirs, and she saw how it went. And so she was like, I have to do this.
Yeah.
And so she decided to do the boudoir session right then and there, which I was like, okay, well, hopefully I've got this down at this point. But it was nice to see that she had the experience of watching other women, and she felt empowered enough to do it herself right there and then, which was, it was an honor to me that she was willing to do that in that exact moment. But we had a prior relationship, just like you said.
Yeah.
We've known each other for 3 years. We've communicated vendor wise. We've become friends. And so I think you're 100% right. Just reaching out to my email list is a perfect way to go.
Yeah. And what you said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but the makeup artist is like a gold mine. At all possible, if you're working with people and they're comfortable, have them do a session with you. But not only that, what I do with some of the people I work with, and I have them down over here somewhere, is I have referral cards that I give to my makeup artists, which essentially they can hand to the brides that they're working with. And I give them, like a referral amount by someone coming in and working with, because if you can hook up with a couple of good makeup artists, they work with brides every single week. Every week they're with bridal parties. So
it's funny that you say that. My makeup artist, the makeup artist who did the boudoir session, she actually got together 12 of her girlfriends and they rented an Airbnb for the weekend so I could go and take boudoir pictures of all 12 of them. And they're like, we're just going to have a blast together. It's just going to be a girls' weekend. And it's like, that's beyond what I could have expected. But she got the word out before I could even do it. And she just said, what weekend do you have free? Great. We rented this Airbnb. Okay. That's amazing. So,
and that's how it'll go. And it's like that old hair commercial. They'll tell 2 friends and then they'll tell 2 friends. And really that's how it goes. And that's how I find that it will start. But like I said, that's not enough really to sustain. At some point, you have to step beyond that and you have to start bringing people in. You just can't hope that people find you in those referrals. So it's paid advertising. We're not going to get too detailed into that, but there's lots of methods through Google that you could target ads to very specific groups and you'll start spending money. I don't think that's a great thing to do at first, especially when you don't know who your audience is and you may not have the funds to go spending on a lot of ads, and people wind up doing ads and not having to do it right. And they say, oh, no one's finding me. That's all.
I think this is a perfect transition into one of my other questions. So how did you figure out your ideal client? And like, why are they your ideal client?
Yeah, this I have to cheat and look at what I wrote down on my list, because this is something that is really like you could do a whole show on this. And this too isn't something that has one answer. And what I found that is my client may not be yours. It has to come down to your geography a little bit. And, I'm around a lot of people in New York, and some people may be in areas that are quieter. You may have to take whatever you can get. Over the course of my doing boudoir, I have settled on, brides were my focus. And then not just all brides, like New York brides up in upper North Jersey. There are people who spend extravagant amount of money on weddings. I guess it's everywhere, but here there are these like marble mansions and Goldie, these elaborate, these huge buildings that people do all these giant weddings in, and they spend a lot of money. So my thought was, they got to have a little money for me. They're spending 40, 50, 60, 80 grand on these weddings. I got to get myself a piece of that.
Yeah.
So I knew that that's who I wanted to, after just taking anybody. Now, I don't limit myself just to that, but my marketing efforts go after mostly brides and that segment of brides, people who have money, people who are going to spend, people who value like sort of experiences and enjoy what I do and, want to have fun. And the tricky part is convincing people that they should be paying for that, which is another whole issue, because when it comes to photography, unlike automobiles where they may understand something is a higher brand, like a Mercedes is different than a Hyundai in photography, or, the people think everything's the same. So that's another trick in and of itself, convincing people why there are sort of different levels of photographers. But, I just can't tell you specifically, and I don't think even right away you may know who your ideal client is. But I think that's part of a broader question that comes down to, you know, how you want to run your business and choosing whether you'd rather be higher volume and at a lower price, or rather work with fewer people and charge them more. And there isn't a right answer there. I just come to the point and the place in doing what I'm doing is that I'd rather work with fewer people and charge more. So of course, the hardest part about my job is turning people away, you know, and I may get, I don't know, 60 people or more a month inquiring with me for the 5 or 6 spots that I shoot, and a majority of them, you know, have some idea that they're going to come in and they'll write me these long, elaborate, you know, I love your pictures, especially this one. And they'll go through this whole thing, and then, you know, like I got $300.
My budget is $300, right?
You know, and so the hard part about what I do, and it's not judging anybody again on what they have or don't have, but explaining to people, you know, thanks, I appreciate this, but you know, my brides are in this range to this range or whatever, and so that's the hard part, is turning people away, in my case, and so that's just how I chose to do it. But there may be areas, or there may be people where at first I would probably just take anybody, you know, and not worry about too much about ideal clients, because as you go along, you may find that, yeah, you know, I prefer to work with this type of woman, or I prefer to work with this type of woman, or whatever the case may be. And don't settle on only eating sushi, maybe till you've tried everything, you know, out there. And then you may find, you know what, now I've figured this is what I like the best. And then you can start targeting that group. So I don't think when getting started, you have to worry too much about focusing on a particular type of a client. And it does get tricky though, because as you go along, and we talked about a little bit of this before, you look out on websites for photographers, and if you take a look at your average boudoir website, just look at anyone and just read the content on there, or for Instagram, like people who are or boudoir, and you read all of these captions that they write with their posts, that you would think by just using that to judge women in America, you would think that women in this country are all broken and capable of like managing their lives. And I always looked at that and wondered, like, my mind works very different. And this gets very tricky, because if your message, again, going down this road about ideal clients, is that you're here to heal the wounded, and you know, who do you think you're going to attract?
You're going to attract
that's
the
your
wounded.
message.
Right.
If your message is that life is unfair, who do you think you're going to attract? Right. If your message is that, you know, women, the world is oppressing everybody, who do you think you're going to attract? The oppressed. Right. And that's okay. If you found your spot, or you find joy in working with that group, you know, right. If you really have a place in your heart that you understand that you've gone through this, or this is something you can relate to somebody and help them, that's fine. You know, that was never my thing. Probably, again, because I'm not a woman, and, you know, men and women are different. I've always, and the people that I've worked with have always been so super positive, great people, successful, happy. I never saw that side of it. You know, the people that come into me are confident. They have a lot of fun. They're eager. They're laughing. And I just never sent out that message that I was some kind of a spiritual Sherpa that was there to, you know, change lives in that manner. I never felt it was necessary. I never saw that as being warranted by the people that I worked with. It was always upbeat and positive. So what kind of people do you think find their way to me? The people who want to have fun, you know?
Well, but that goes to say, like, when you're writing your copy, you need to be intentional. Like, when you are writing a caption, you have to be intentional about who you are attracting with that caption. You need to be intentional about the message that you're sending out into the world of photography. That it's one of the things that we, as a wedding photographer, I worked on this over the last 2 years, and I have seen a complete change in the kind of client I'm attracting just because I'm putting out exactly who I'm looking for. It's there. Like it's in my writing. It's in my imagery. It's in the way that I respond to them via email or call them or speak with them. And so I have found that it has just changed my business because of that. And I feel like a lot of people just do this is what I'm feeling right now, and they don't even think about the subconscious message behind it.
Right.
So it's kind of interesting. So what kind of outfits do you recommend for your boudoir sessions, and why?
And I'm going to add one more thing on before we go forward, because it just kind of popped into my brain. So whether you are going to be making a page on your wedding website or whether you're going to be doing a whole entire another website, you probably, I would say, add a page on first. It's easier than branch out if you need to make a whole another website. But the interesting thing to me is that, I don't want to make this sound mean or anything, but if you never would go to any website for a wedding photographer, or say like a kid's photographer, or we'll use weddings as an example, where they would say, life is unfair.
Right.
It's tragic.
Right.
I'm going to make you the happiest bride because you're unhappy. You just don't see that same kind of message that intimate photographers put on any wedding website. Imagine you went in to get a salad for lunch, and you sit down at the table with your salad, and suddenly someone comes over and sits down next to you in the salad, and they're like, Christora? And you're like, who the hell are you? And you're like, well, I work here, and we're the Empowerment Salad Company, and I know you're a broken woman, and we're going to make you happy by the time you're done with this salad, and I'm here to lift you, and you're going to be so happy by the time you're going to, like, this is going to be fierce lunch for you. You'd think that it was you'd be like, what the hell is going on with this? You would never go back to that restaurant probably in your life if someone did that. But yet, this is what a lot of women's portrait photographers do. This is that one and only message that they think they need to put out because they look to the left, they look to the right, and everybody else is with this same, you're going to be fierce and you're going to be this, So my one bit of advice there would be like, you don't have to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's all right to be happy. It's all right to have a positive message. I don't think that every woman in the United States is damaged and broken and vulnerable and oppressed and whatever the case may be. At least I haven't seen that, and I haven't come across that. So for the people that are listening to this, it's not an obligation that your website or marketing message has to be one of oppression and negativity. So I just wanted to add that little bit on to the end there, because it's just so everywhere that people starting feel they need to put some deep, heavy, kind of wording on their website that this is all about salvation. And it could just be about having fun. It could just be about getting a cute anniversary gift. It could just be about having a great wedding gift. It's not all crying and tears and weeping and tissues, and really it's not. I know I'm just the opposite of 99% of the people out there, but maybe that's why I'm pretty good at what I do and I've been pretty successful. I hate to, bring that up, but just for the people, in the rest of the country, you don't have to do that. There's no need to have that kind of message, especially it could be positive. Yeah. It could work. But on to the next question you ask about the outfits. And, this again, there isn't one right answer. And Christora's question is, what kind of outfits do you recommend for people to come in? And everybody is going to have a little bit of preference here. And I think usually one of the things that you'll find too is maybe women, as we talked about a little bit before, wanting to wear something a little bit more revealing or risque and not being able to say that up front to you.
Right.
Because again, it's not what people usually would come up and say, well, I'm going to wear these crotchless things, because it's just not how people talk. So you will find often people asking you for guidelines or asking you what I should bring in. And that will be, again, subjective from photographer to photographer, the type of work that you do. I have created a very long PDF of just like a whole like onboarding guide, part of which is like 2 pages of outfit ideas and suggestions of not just things that people should wear, but maybe things that are okay. And you can't see, I'm using like air quotes here, okay to bring. Because the way that I have worded my guide again is, I know I'm some guy that you don't know, and it may be a bit embarrassing to ask me, but these are the kind of things that people, ask about, and it's okay. You want to bring in like your handcuffs? It's okay.
You're
it's
making
all
people,
okay.
Well, you're making people realize that it's not just them.
Right.
Like this has happened. It happens all the time.
Right.
It's typical. I'm not going to be like, oh, I've never seen that before.
Right.
It's not going to happen.
It's not necessary, but it's you don't have to, but it's fine. And then what you'll run into, I think, a lot is that a lot of women aren't just like lingerie women. They don't really have these closets full of all these elaborate outfits and like they're pulling them off the rack. So I think sometimes it's like guidelines like what are people normally wearing, because they're going to go out and buying some items and they just don't know because they don't buy this kind of stuff. They're just wearing whatever they wear every day, and they may want something different for a session like this to get dressed up in. And what I would advise you here, and over the past 3 years, again, this is part of one of my emails that goes out, is I would rather have somebody buy one nice outfit than come in with 3 or 4 cheap crap Amazon lingerie outfits that don't fit and photograph horribly. And I noticed, like 3 or 4 years ago, these clear plastic bags showing up in my sessions and these just awful, and let me tell you, the lace, it's just awful. There's no deal coming in with like an $8, lingerie outfit. And yes, it's cheap. I get it. It may be less expensive than going to Victoria's Secret or some of these other places, but don't. And it looks inexpensive. It just doesn't look right in the photos. They don't fit right. It's not the kind of look that you want in a boudoir session. And you always have to approach this with kind of your wedding mindset and thinking, I always say, would you feed Taco Bell to your wedding guests? And people are, no. Well, it's the cheapest.
Right.
But that's not always the right way to go.
Sure.
It's a special occasion. So you're going to give them, a nice meal in a wedding. Boudoir is also a special occasion. You're not going to be doing this like every week. So let's cut out the Taco Bell, get the one nice outfit or 2. And I'd rather have someone come in with just one thing and look great than 5 things that just really are not flattering, don't fit well. And, the people aren't going to look as cute as they could, wearing it.
I mean, especially as a woman, if I don't try something on and I get it home and then it fits poorly.
Yeah.
Like, I'm never going to wear that.
And you're not going to feel right in it. But like I said, but they don't. They come in with the outfit still in the bags, never tried it on. And it's not that every woman is like a Honey Birdette woman. And if you don't know what that is, they make these really expensive, elaborate buckles and chain underwear that's really not nice, but it's like super expensive. And not that you have to go spend $300 on a lingerie set to come in, but the alternative is worse. So try things on that are flattering to your body style and size, and spend some money on it. Get quality items, and you will be rewarded. And then the silly thing is like, well, I would never wear this. I'm like, why wouldn't you? So this is your Christmas gift that you're coming to, yeah. All right. So why would you not like give your husband or partner or boyfriend the album, and then when he's opening it up and say, oh my God, I love this outfit, and be like, you mean this one? And have it on like, and they're like, oh yeah, I never thought about that. Come on, ladies.
Yeah.
Come on now.
Oh, yeah.
Come on.
Oh.
You gotta like, so, you'll find use for it. It may not stay on for very long, but you'll find use for it.
It won't be on for very long. I love it. So when's the best time of day to photograph boudoir?
Well, we talked about this
a little bit earlier.
So we'll, I'll go back, and I think it really comes down to what you choose to do. So if you're like me and doing like natural light, I'm dragging my people in 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning because I don't want people like sleepy. I also have people that come from very far away, and I don't want them to look like they got out of bed at 4 o'clock in the morning. So we'll start a little later, but I usually noonish or so want to get started by the latest so we can have a few hours of light, of natural window light there. Mm-hmm. If you're shooting strobes and making your own light, it doesn't really matter because you can schedule later. You can schedule at night if that's the kind of look that you want. It's going to look different. It's that harsh, shadowy kind of a look. And this isn't about technical mastery of lighting, but that's a whole other subject. But if you're creating your own light, it doesn't really matter. You could work what's convenient to you, what works best for you and for your clients in that front.
Okay. Kind of along that lines, what about props or like things, one of the biggest things that I've seen recently has been the angel wings. Yeah. And it's like, oh my God, those angel wings are huge.
Yeah.
What kind of props have you seen? I know that you're not quite a prop guy, but
yeah.
What props have you seen people bringing in
people
themselves?
Have fun with that. Yeah, and I'm a minimalist in that regard. And there are photographers, again, which fine with have these big closets of lingerie and outfits and robes and sheer things. And if you want to spend your money on that and that works for you, that's great. What I found in that front, and I have a few things that I bring in, but not very many. And again, because women are all different heights, sizes, and shapes. So it's very hard to, find things that are going to fit all people. And I don't want to be doing laundry.
No.
I just don't feel like that. I need that extra job in my life to be cleaning things. And I was always a bit sketchy about giving people used like outfits too.
Yeah.
I don't know, but that's just like me, even though they're cleaned and stuff like that. But with those wings, it's fine. I'm not a wing type person, but if someone's having fun with that and they like the pictures, hey, and I know that some of those wings are thousands of dollars. Like, they'll spend $3,000 or $4,000 on a set of wings, and if that's in your budget and you're going to make that back in your sessions, and if it gets you $300 or $400 extra dollars, like I know some charge people extra just for the photos, like in the wings, and if you have that group that wants to do that, that's great.
Right.
And if you're going to get value from that, if you were just starting out, I wouldn't go spend $4,000 on a set of wings. And there are more important things where you could spend your money on. But when it comes to props, like you said, I was never a prop person. I don't bring in props. I don't tell customers to bring along props. But that being said, women will bring what they want to bring, and I never deter anybody. If someone comes to me and says, my husband is like a Giants fan, or can I bring the jersey, or I want to bring a football or a golf club or whatever it is, bring it on in. Because what you have to remember too, this isn't about you. This is about, them too. So if that's what they want to make that connection to their partner, that's fine. Or in Christmas, I'm not one for dressing women up in Santa outfits and hats and, fake fireplaces, which is fine. But, that for the timeliness of those photos, you may not always want to be looking at yourself in like a Santa teddy or something like that. So themes and props, I was more evergreen in my photos. People just wear whatever they want to wear. I don't force anybody. But props are fine. And as far as what things are being on hand, the things that I usually keep now are like wrist restraints and handcuffs, and believe it or not, it sounds like hog tie things, leathery type things to tie people up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I find, I'm sorry, I'm going to cut you off, that these are things, again, that women would get in. They're like, oh, yeah, I meant to bring my stuff, but they were uncertain. Remember, we were talking about that uncertainty. And then I hear this all the time. Oh, I meant, or I was going to, which meant I was afraid to bring it because I thought that maybe you were going to make fun of me, or this was not going to be what I thought. So I keep things like that. Lately, I've been more extreme in my photos. I found that Boudoir is taking this harsh turn, and it's not for everybody, but I'm not going to say. You'll see it on my website where we've been doing things with like vibrators and stuff like that, which there is this huge pent-up demand for, apparently, which is not for everybody. So people will see these photos now and they'll be like, that photo on your website, but this comes out like after the fact.
Sure.
So I will keep smaller things like that maybe on hand, but not a lot of clothing. But if you have the space and you have outfits that you like to photograph, like sheer black robes, which always look great, there's no harm in keeping a couple robes and having those for people to use.
That's great suggestion. What about posing? Like, do you have a go-to pose that you do with every woman? What are your kind of tricks that you have for different plus size versus itty bitty titty club? There are. Yeah.
And I'm like doing most of the talking here. Usually I like to have the people do the most of the talking. I just realized this now, but I understand this is you asking me questions. So I hope I'm not like talking too much.
No, I'm loving it.
Not. But posing is one of those things that is important. However, I think it's made out to be by some people sounding like it's the most important thing, which it isn't. And you're right. Because when you start working with people, sometimes you may never know who's going to be walking through that door. You may talk to them again, but you may not see. And the way you would pose a 23-year-old woman who ran track all through college is very different than the way you would pose a 55-year-old woman who has an office job that, let's say, she may not be very athletic. So by just learning one way of doing things, it may suit one style, or you may find poses that you could do with a 23-year-old woman, even if the other, it's just not the way a 55-year-old woman should be posing her body, even if she is in shape. So a lot of this is just age appropriate and body type appropriate. And the funny thing too is that, in 2021, you're not allowed to recognize that people are different, but they're very different. You know what I mean? We're not saying you're a bad person, you're a great mom, you're a great this, you're everything. It's not that, but people have very different body types. And you may not be able to pose people who are very overweight in the same way as people who are fit. It's just not flattering to them.
Right.
It is not going to show them in their best light. And this is really one of the toughest things to learn, because until you run into this the first time, and you may be saying to yourself, and this is where honesty comes in, because looking at your client and saying, oh my God, you rocked it, when you know that this is not the case, really can be one of the more challenging things in doing what I do or what you plan on doing. And it took me a long time to kind of get comfortable working with people of different body types. And I guess the short version is that there isn't a simple solution to that. It's much easier working with the fit 23-year-old woman than the very overweight 45 or 55-year-old woman. And you can really do damage to people. And this is one of the things that, not a lot of things that make me angry, but when I look out on, social media and see people working with very overweight people and saying, she rocked this, and it's just really unflattering work. It's completely nothing that I would even ever show anybody. Makes me question, people's judgment sometimes as women's photographers, because I think you have a responsibility again to make people look their best. And so this becomes very, very tricky. And without getting into the specifics, like I said, when you have someone that comes in that's 23-year-old, and it's hard to make a mistake. Those are the days you're like, whew, this is going to be easy.
Yeah.
As people's bodies change, you'll often, and women again will tell you, I've had 3 kids, so I have scars. I don't want my stomach to be seen because I have a lot of stretch marks on there. And, my boobs are not what they used to be, or my arms are, and people will come to you and say these things. So as we were talking about, you have to be very understanding of this and work around it. And for people who really, I think the most common thing is this middle section. They really are uncomfortable with that. And one of the simplest things that I've always found is just to cover it up. Have people bring robes, people bring shirts, have people bring something that they can wear. Like I'm having, I have a sweater on now where they can still wear something underneath, and then you can use their robe or something to strategically cover their stomach or so forth. And I don't think that a lot of lying down poses are really very flattering to people that are very overweight either. And this is going to sound mean, but there's just no shape to that. It's not a flattering look to anybody. So I tend to do people like that, more standing poses than lying down poses. And there are other little tricks that you will learn through experience mostly. And I think what you have to do to be successful is to be very honest with yourself. And when you're done, and the first time you run into somebody that is a challenge, you'll sit down and you'll think to yourself, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if we got it. I don't know if even she's going to like any of these, because it's going to be so different than your friend who came in, that you'll be sitting there going, ooh, and it can be stressful. And this is a tough thing to do, but I would say practice with all body types, hire a model. And, it's not that you want to say, I need someone that's overweight or I need some, but practice and or do some viewing online of some people who are successful photographers and see how they deal with these situations. But the bottom line is, by just going through it and learning how to move people and pose them, you'll find that what works best for you in your situations. Maybe it's just not doing fewer full body. Maybe it's just focusing more on portrait or their face and shoulder area, and so it's tricky. And it's difficult. It's one of the more difficult things on the job. But other than that, as far as having a core group of poses, there's only a few ways you can pose people. They're going to be standing, they're going to be lying down, kneeling, or whatever the case may be. And then there's thousands of variations where you can put their arms and their legs and their hands leaning and so forth. And as to come up with a routine, I would liken it, and I always tell people, it's like learning a dance number. So if you're learning a complicated dance and you're going to a dance school, they may show you the whole dance, but then they break it down into steps. Here's count 1 through 8. Here's count, 8 through 16 or whatever it is, and learn a few basic things. Learn 5 standing poses, leaning against a window, leaning against a wall, leaning wherever, and just do those over and over till you have them memorized. And then once you have those, learn 5 or 4 poses lying down. And just do those over and over again until you're sure you can do them. And then the moment you're not overlooking them, so slowly adding on, even if it's only 1 pose per person, per session. And what I did forever too is on my phone, I had a little cheat sheet. I would have on my Dropbox little folders, kneeling poses, standing poses, lying down poses. And I'm not afraid to open my phone so I don't forget to do something, and go down the list. Oh, yeah, I meant to do this one, because you get caught up in the moment. You're working with somebody, and things kind of take their own lives, and you may not be and by the end of it, you're like, oh my God, I forgot to do this, or I never did this pose. So don't be afraid to have a little guide with you, or even if you write them down on your phone, like in a text, in a memo, or have little photos. And the night before, okay, I want to do this pose standing up or this pose, and work through the list mechanically and explain to the people, I'm learning some new poses. We're going to be trying this out today. Sorry about that. But, I think they're going to look good. And so we're going to test it out on you. Yeah. And just build that up slowly, pose by pose by pose. And, you may find that as you get more accomplished, brides have a certain group. At that point, you may come down with like, all right, she's a bride. I know I have to do the ring. I know I have to do the veil. I know I have to do this. You may have a basic framework. And you may wind up with a basic framework of poses for your clients. But people won't be sending you ideas too. I'm going to hang upside down from the chandelier and do this, or I'm going to do this. And I'm like, all right, I'm up for the challenge. If you feel like hanging upside down, let's do it. Yeah. But make an outline, whether for yourself, I would say save it on your phone, do some work online, and pick a few things and just practice them, because it's never going to look the way you see it in that picture the first time you try it. Right. So find a friend, hire a model for an hour, practice those poses till you are comfortable doing them, and because there's little tweaky things like moving arms and bodies. And the biggest offense I see is people like tilting their heads. They're letting their people like turn, which drives me like up the wall. But the mechanics of it can make a difference in something looking cute versus something looking amateurish. Mm-hmm. And there are posing courses online. Always have to align yourself with someone who knows what they're doing. Sure. But I would, get involved in someone who's an expert in posing and break it down step by step, and just add one or two things into your routine as you kind of get comfortable with them, and then before you know it, you'll know 20 poses, and you'll be like, it gets a lot easier.
I have to say I'm really appreciative of you just taking the time to talk to me. What do you think is the best advice you have for a photographer that's trying to get into the boudoir field?
Well, I think if we can see something from today, we learn that it's not easy. Mm-hmm. And I think that people get into doing this for the wrong reasons. And it's something that we talked about before, somehow changing people's lives, which is great. But there's a lot of steps that come before that's going to happen. And you have to take it slow. And I always use the example of it. Women mostly do this, and usually the story goes along the lines of, it was Debbie, and Debbie had an at-home cupcake business, and nobody liked her strawberry kale cupcakes, and she got very mad because no one would buy them. And so she was very mad at her friends that her cupcake business was failing, and it's all everybody else's fault. It's not her fault. So one day she took a picture, posted it on her Facebook, and her friend was like, "Oh my God, Debbie, that picture is so good. You should be a photographer." And Debbie's like, "You think? Really?" And the next thing you know, Debbie sells her stand mixer and buys a camera on Amazon. And then she's on Squarespace, and suddenly she's a pro boudoir photographer now, because it's that simple. And she's already, screaming out that message, "I'm changing women. I'm changing the lives of women." And that's pretty much a recipe for failure right there. There are so many steps that come first. Now, you're obviously very good with a camera. You have that experience working professionally. I've seen your photos. You know what you're doing.
Yeah.
But imagine, deciding that your goal is that you wanted to change women, which is fine. Imagine that you woke up and decided you wanted to be like Eddie Van Halen, rest in peace, and be like the best guitarist in the world. And you get up that day and you run down to Guitar Center and you go into the guy, "I want the same model that Eddie uses." And he's like, "Well, I don't care. It's over there." And you spend like $5,000 on a guitar, come home. Does that mean you're like a pro guitar player?
Right.
Does that mean that bands are going to start coming to you because of your scary talents when you've never touched a guitar in your life?
Right.
Probably not. But yet, in the photography world, this is what people often think the way that it works.
Yeah.
And how do you become a great guitarist? You lock yourself in a bedroom hours after school every day and just play and play and play till your fingers bleed, and you learn a little bit, and then most people give up. Right? Because they just want the result, but they don't want to put in the work. But the few who find that joy or have that desire and follow it through, they start to emerge as guitarists. And it's very similar in photography, where people want to jump to that end result and like, "I'm changing lives." But they just take the most god-awful photos. They don't take the time to learn, which could take a couple of years.
Yeah.
And
it
practice.
Took me 3 years to even do my first wedding. But part of that was because I took the time to do the research with it. I didn't want to jump right in. And then I'm looking at my photos from even 4 years ago now as a wedding photographer. It is night and day. So you learn as you go, 100%.
Yeah. So, it takes time, and there isn't going to be an immediate result. It could be 2 years or more before I would say you can call yourself a pro, or you know what you're doing. And so there's a lot of practice and, hiring models, or, your friends will only put up with so much of you telling them to come over to take photos of them. They're like, "Christora, I've had enough. I don't really feel like rolling around in your bed in my underwear anymore. I'm busy. I got to go to Target on Tuesday. I'm sorry."
Right. Home goods on Wednesday. It's okay.
And then at that point, you have to say to yourself, are people willing to pay for what you do? And there's a huge lack of self-awareness with people who just can't step outside themselves and say, "Yeah, really, I don't have this. It's not good." And they think that especially in Boudoir, that narrative is enough that somehow they're going to be changing lives. But it's not enough. It's really not enough.
No.
And there's a lot more that goes to that. So at starting off, you have to have that good foundation, first of all, in understanding how to take a photo, and then, hook yourself up with somebody who is a mentor or an educator in that field. Get some one-on-one training once you know what you're doing, and that will save you years and years and years of trying to figure it out, on your own. And if you make it through all that and you're still waking up in the morning saying, gee, I want to change lives, then hey, go change some lives. But the best advice I have is, it's going to be a long, painful route, probably from when you start to get where you actually think what you're going to be doing. And it just takes time. So you just have to be prepared to put in the work, just like with anything else. So,
well, thank you so much for answering all of my questions. Was there anything that I should have asked that I didn't think about?
See, you're putting me on the spot here.
I am.
I think we covered so much ground in this show, and I would say you're 5 steps ahead of anybody else because you've been doing this for a while. So in that front, but it's hard to build up a client base. It takes time there, and use your connections, use your email list and your makeup artist to do that. Mm-hmm. And then you'll find out if it's the thing for you. Like I said, and it could be great money. It could be a great add-on in your business, adding that in addition to the engagement sessions and the wedding sessions. But I think that, like weddings, if you're really going to be great at it, it's more than the money.
It's so true.
You really have to get a personal satisfaction from doing this. And, you'll know if you enjoy it or not.
When you do it anyway, like I would photograph weddings anyway. Right. Even without the money, that's when you've really found something special.
Yeah. So you're doing it. I think there has to be more than money, kind of behind it, and you'll find you're sitting up at 11 o'clock at night after you did a session, staring at the photos, going, what could I have done better? Mm-hmm. I'm not super happy with this, and making notes. Next time I'm going to do this, and always seeing that improvement, or always wanting to improve in some way.
Yeah,
I still do that.
Yeah.
Well, I sit down and bang my head against the wall. How I screwed. Oh my God, I screwed this one thing up. It should have been so much better. And that's just, you're never, I think, satisfied. You're always trying to get better and better, and it becomes, I do it because as a challenge, to myself. And is it possible? Can I be the best, intimate photographer out there? For whatever that means? Can I make the women have a great time? It's not just about the money, but if you're good at what you do, the money will follow.
Absolutely. If
you can make people happy, the money will follow. And that's, why a lot of people get into that. So
it's perfect.
But as you know, where do I have to go right now?
For a session.
I have to go for a session.
Woohoo.
So, you're just, it just becomes part of your life. So I hope that today I answered at least some of your questions here. And as you can see, you could literally talk about this for hours and hours and hours. There's so much to learn and so much to go over. And I hope even if someone can glean just one thing, and you could work on one thing at a time, it's a process, and it's not that simple.
Absolutely.
And, but it is possible. But people underestimate the amount of work. And you'll find out whether that's for you or not when you start to get into it, and you'll see that it is a lot of work. But the great part, as we mentioned, is helping people, be happy and to change their lives a little bit. So,
all right. Well, thank you again.
And thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
And just before we can get out of here, Christora, anywhere we can find you and your podcast?
Sure. So Tom Russo and myself are on a podcast called
Tom's going to be so angry at me. He's going to be so mad. He's going to be so jealous. I stole you. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's okay. We run a podcast called The Capture Crew. Tom is a little more serious than I am. I'm a little goofier, but we talk all things related to photography, marketing, branding, the actual ins and outs of a session, all of it, in particular in relation to couple photography and weddings. So that's what we've been interviewing this year. We're only in our second season, but we've been interviewing a couple of people in other fields because we feel like we can all learn from each other. So you can find us at the Capture Crew Podcast on Instagram. TheCaptureCrew.net is our website. And then you can find me personally, greenappleweddings.co, not .com, but .co. Green Apple Photo KY is my username for Instagram and also for TikTok. I just recently got on TikTok.
Oh, look at you.
I know.
Are you going to be dancing? Are you going to be dancing for us, Christora? Are you going to be one of those dancing photographers?
I hope not, but probably. Let's be honest.
All right. That's all right. I understand.
I'm probably going to succumb to it. It'll be fine.
It's very tempting.
Yes, exactly.
To be dancing.
So
I will tune into your videos and watch you dancing in your living room.
My husband and I both got the vaccine yesterday, and we couldn't go in the same car, so we did a frozen yell back and forth to each other where it's funny. I think I'm funny. That's all that matters, right? So I'm having a blast with TikTok right now. It's just a great outlet for humor. So I've enjoyed it.
It is. And we need a few more laughs, especially in 2021. So
definitely
go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
And thanks for coming on today. I know you have a busy schedule too. So I'm glad we made it through. And I appreciate it. And just one more thing we have to do. You just have to say goodbye to everybody so we can get the hell out of here.
All right. Sayonara.
Sayonara, everybody.
Bye, guys. Thanks so much.